to Africans in America. Only 2,000. So there was this thing they went through, a born man versus the made man. The born man, the king and the queens of Europe, had to deputize people to colonize the lands, the Columbuses and the Cecil Rhodeses who went to Africa. They weren't the aristocracy, but they fought to be gladiators and colonists and explorers. The Lewis and Clark, who were masons. These men used the societies to advance the wishes of the ruling class, and they set up a system, a circle within a circle, within another circle. Each circle protected the circle within it. So when you look to that Boule logo, you see there's an urn. There's an animal with the wing of the bird, the tail of a lion, and it's got an urn, and it's got its paw over the urn, and it says in the history book number 2 by Hobart Jarrett that in the urn are the names of the people who are chosen to lead the state, which suggests that part of the society function is not to make known who the people of power and authority are. And one of their most serious indictments to this society is what they were used to do against Marcus Garvey.
Could you explain that, please?
Marcus Garvey, who began to surge for Africa, the Negro was breaking free, doesn't have a good reason to get with the white American establishment.
You're right.
They don't have a good reason.
They're not getting paid.
They just built the country, got set free, didn't get the 40 acres and the mule, got reconstructed when they began to move into the southern houses and the Senate. They got reconstructed and knocked back. So there's disarray in our community. And this is before the industrial cities of Chicago and others began to have steel and the stock markets. These are cattle, not bonds, where people began to work, and the South fled to the North to work in those factories. And Robert Abbott, who was a Boule man from Chicago defender, who it was a period when all the black editors were brought into Washington and told that they would have cracked down on Marcus Garvey, and their newspapers were not to be used. The Pittsburgh Courier, Chicago Defender, the Afro-American in Baltimore and Washington. All of these are Boule families, the advisors to the king, this group. So when Marcus Garvey came, whites began to think that maybe assimilation is better. Maybe we can escalate. Let's not let these go. Maybe they don't seem too pissed off about all of this. Maybe they'll forgive these things we did to their ancestors, and maybe we can trick them, have a little, want some more. So as Garvey began to move, they began to see that a Harlem Renaissance could have been necessary, that they could then attract Africans in America into literature and science and the arts and poetry. And when he said back to Africa, he's trying to get to Liberia. So R.R. Moulton, who was a big Boule man from Tuskegee University, who replaced Booker T. Washington, R.R. Moulton became a spy for the U.S. government to coordinate the program against Marcus Garvey in America. We have declassified documents that came out in 1993. The Memphis Commercial Appeal did the story about Martin King, Kwame Ture. A lot of things came out about spying. Well, in that, which did not make the public press, when we actually filed for the documents, there was R.R. Moulton telling Von Demon at Military Intelligence, don't tell anyone what I'm going to tell you about what Marcus Garvey said last night in Harlem. And the letters marked confidential. And, of course, eventually R.R. Moulton, who went to Liberia, was given $5 million to form a committee to keep Marcus Garvey out of Liberia. He never made it. He wanted to get there bad. They put $5 million in 1919, man. This is 50 million, 100 million today. Inconceivable. And they rewarded R.R. Moulton for trying to undermine Marcus Garvey. He got the first, check this deep, he got the first black veterans hospital in the United States at Tuskegee. And then what did they give him for reward? Syphilis. You see the reward? See, he got something.
Blowback.
But what they got was bad, what they gave him,
So let me ask you, so in essence what you're saying is that the Boule represents the buffer class, the petit bourgeois, the comprador buffer class that manages Africa's workers, peasants, students, and middle class in many ways, and are paid well for that. And they receive their direct orders from the European capitalist class.
Yes, if you were to look to today, where Boule members like Vernon Jordan, who is managing director of Goldman Sachs, he took Bill Clinton to his first Bilderberger meeting in 1971. The black man took the white man from Arkansas to the big international meeting. Vernon Jordan, former head of the Urban League, who groomed Ron Brown, who then went on to become Secretary of Commerce, killed in a plane crash, murdered, because Boule are considered domestic. Martin King was Boule. Look at the relationship between Martin and Kwame over going against the war. You don't hear anybody in the African-centered community primarily against the war. They're basically accepting it or looking for what they try to get when whites are passing out things like, you know, a grant here, this or that. They don't appear to be focused on that money that's being wasted, those billions of dollars.
You saying the Afrocentric community
Africans
support the war?
They are not. No. I'm just saying they are not pushing against the war. Same way Martin King, when April 4th of 67,
you're right.
1 year before he was killed to the day, when he came out of Riverside Church with Kwame in a shirt and tie in the front row, waiting to hear, because he called and said, you got to hear this. He comes out against the war. Boule men are told to be domestic, not international. Mickey Leland was Sigma Pi Phi. He tried to stop a starvation going on in Ethiopia, Somalia. His plane crashes into the mountain. Congressman from Texas, he dies. Ron Brown, Martin King, no question. Martin King became international, and that became his biggest sin. He was financed by some of the greatest foundations America ever had to offer. But if they get beyond the defined limit, then there's trouble.
In terms of young people today who are on college campuses who want to join fraternities and sororities, what is your advice?
It's interesting, the movie Stomp the Yard. I thought that was an interesting attempt to try to reconstruct the options, because they are catching hell in the streets. There is a rise of Kemetic-centered, African-centered societies that are repudiations of Greeks. And this is on the rise on many of the campuses around the country. And many of those fraternities and sororities, like the American military, were finding reduced numbers. Questions of hazing and brutality. And see, that's an important thing about a secret society, is the initiation or the ritual, which is an act of submission. I would never want anyone to underestimate when someone goes on that line and they beat them or they make them do things or unusual things or ridicule them, that act is an act of submission, and that's very essential to keeping a secret society in order. How do you command that subordination? And for today, when they're on the campuses, they see the Boule. If you look to the Boule Journal, you can look up sigmapi5.net. You can hit up my website, stevecoakley.com, and then you can link into their website. You look at their Boule Journal, you see what they play up. They're the head of everything. They're announcing every key position they have. They're the advisor to every person, every corporation. They're the black head of American Express. You know, we can just walk on down the line of those that roles were theirs and only theirs. No one got past. You know, I noticed that Harold Washington, our black mayors were uniquely Boule. Andy Young when he was Atlanta, Dinkins when he was New York, Bradley when he was Los Angeles. But none of those men were able to groom their man. So Bradley was mayor 20 years, but didn't have Bradley too. You know, Dinkins couldn't turn it over to anybody. Them white folk walked and beat on his door to run him out. Different cities. Detroit, Coleman Young was not a Boule member. Harold Washington was not a Boule member. And the relationship between the white financial firms and Harold Washington was uniquely different than it was with men who were more trusted.
Okay, we'll take a brief station ID. We'll come back to Brother Steve Coakley, excellent researcher in the question of the Boule. Back to KPFK with Brother Steve Coakley, talking about the Boule and the relationship to the struggling African masses, especially the United States of America. Brother Steve.
Yeah, it just made me think about something we had talked about. You know, as a young brother in Chicago, really wanting to get involved in the movement. When I came back from college, there were various options.